Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. In this program, I invite students who are in Zoom to read a chapter of our book series, and then afterwards I'll share some teachings on that, and then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. This is a great way for you to be able to learn with the original words of the Buddha, making your way to enlightenment and helping you to be able to see what he actually taught using his own words. If you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, you would never be able to actually make your way to enlightenment. You wouldn't even be able to get your way to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment itself. So it's really important to study with the original words of the Buddha. So if you'd like to volunteer in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand. I see Pat's already done that. But when we get to the question period, anybody who's in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you guys can ask questions by putting that into the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. So Pat, if you'd like to go ahead and read this first chapter, you're more than welcome to.
A great gift. Monks, here, a noble disciple, having abandoned the destruction of life, abstains from the destruction of life. By abstaining from the destruction of life, the noble disciple gives to an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, hostility, and harm. He himself in turn enjoys immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and harm. This is the first gift, a great gift, highest, of long-standing, traditional, ancient, untainted, and never before tainted, which is not being tainted and will not be tainted, not refused by wise ascetics and Brahmins. This is the stream of merit, stream of the wholesome, nutriment of peacefulness, heavenly, ripening peacefulness, conducive to heaven, that leads to what is inspired for, needed, and agreeable to one's welfare and peacefulness. The other four precepts, which are abstaining from taking of what is not given, abstaining from sexual misconduct, abstaining from lying, and abstaining from consuming intoxicants, substances that cause heedlessness, are repeated with the Buddha's guidance. There are, monks, these 5 gifts, great gifts, highest of long-standing, traditional, ancient, untainted, and never before tainted, which are not being tainted and will not be tainted, not refused by wise ascetics and Brahmins. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is talking about this great gift that we can give to other beings, and in return we experience this gift coming back to us as well. This gift that we can give to other beings is choosing not to cause harm. By choosing not to cause harm and practicing these teachings of the natural laws of existence, and namely the natural law of Kamma, then you're not causing harm to other beings. So part of that cultivation of wisdom to know what is wise and unwise and what leads to harm is by studying the teachings of the Buddha through learning, reflecting, and practicing. And here he's honing in on the 5 precepts, because these are 5 impactful decisions that could cause harm to others, significant harm. But if you're choosing not to actually do the things that he taught as part of the 5 precepts, and you're choosing to practice those precepts closely, then you're experiencing this immeasurable freedom from fear, hostility, and harm yourself, because that's what you're giving to others, that you're not causing harm. So there's this immeasurable number of beings that experience freedom from fear, hostility, and harm, because, for example, the first one, you're not going around actively killing other beings. And now in turn, there's this freedom from fear, hostility, and harm that you have, because if you've ever been doing unwise things in your day-to-day life, and then you go home and you're like worried about that, or you're fearful about that, if you're practicing the natural laws, you can come home and your mind can be at ease and be peaceful because you know that you haven't caused any harm when you went out. And if you put enough of those days together over multiple years, you'll be able to get to the point where your mind's just so peaceful and you're not experiencing any unwholesome results coming back to you. So that's what the Buddha's talking about here. He does talk about how that by you choosing to practice this peacefulness, that it's conducive to heaven. Always keep in mind that when you see the Buddha teaching this, that he's not suggesting that you should aspire to be reborn in the heavenly realm. His teachings aren't about that. It's about getting to peace and joy now. But anything that you're choosing to do on this path to enlightenment, if you happen to fall short of enlightenment for any reason, there's the potential to be reborn into the heavenly world. Again, that's not the goal. The goal is to get to peace and joy now, but that is a particular thing that could happen based on this cause and effect. But those beings in the heavenly realm, they still need to get to enlightenment. They're still in the cycle of rebirth, and oftentimes they're complacent. They don't actually learn and study and grow and develop in order to make their way to enlightenment. So it's not an ideal existence. So here in the human realm, you have the ability to learn, grow, and develop and be able to make your way to enlightenment. And those 5 precepts are kind of the basis of the moral conduct. Here, the Buddha is just kind of referring to them in a very brief way. But if you go study the 5 precepts with the original words of the Buddha, you'll see what he's talking about in terms of these 5 precepts, because they're much more detailed than just no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, because that sounds like black and white. It sounds like absolutes, where he's teaching you a much deeper way of understanding, and he's really helping to illuminate the teachings so that you can be able to understand them in a way that you could actually practice them. And by you learning and practicing the 5 precepts, you're giving these great gifts, and thus you're receiving these great gifts as well, which the Buddha is talking about here, saying that it's not tainted, meaning it's not polluted, right? His teachings are pure, and they're able to help guide you to experiencing the peace and joy of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is volume 6, chapter 31. Looks like Janae has a question here. So the 5 precepts are essentially the highest forms of harm an individual could produce. In some respects, you could think of it that way, yes, because killing would be the highest form of harm that you could produce. Stealing would be a very high thing. Sexual misconduct, lying, taking substances that cause heedlessness. These are 5 really big, impactful decisions. The first 3, the killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, these are things that we typically do in the animal realm. So by choosing to purge that and no longer making decisions in that regard helped you to become more and more human. And then, of course, choosing not to lie, choosing not to take substances that cause heedlessness. This is going to promote nothing but helpfulness and success in your life as you're choosing to function in that way, becoming a better and better human being. Let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. All right. I don't see any in YouTube. And I don't see any in Facebook. So let's go to the next one. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Samantha's volunteering. Go ahead, ma'am.
One is reborn through one's deeds. Monks, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. Here, having abandoned the destruction of life, someone abstains from the destruction of life. With the rod and weapon laid aside, dedicated and kindly, he resides compassionate toward all beings. He does not creep along by body, speech, and mind. His bodily Kamma is straight. His verbal Kamma is straight. His mental Kamma is straight. His destination is straight. His rebirth is straight. But for one with a straight destruction and rebirth, I say, there is one of 2 destinations, either the exclusively pleasant heavens or influential families, such as those of affluent Khatyas, affluent Brahmins, or affluent householders, families that are rich, with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and belongings, abundant wealth and grain. Thus a being is reborn from a being. One is reborn through one's deeds. When one has been reborn, contacts affect one. It is in this way I say that beings are the heirs of their Kamma. The Tathagata spoke of abandoning of taking what is not given and abandoning of sexual misconduct, with discourses similar to that of abandoning taking life. He also spoke of the fourfold wholesome conduct of speech and the threefold wholesome conduct of mind in the same way.
All right, thank you, Samantha. So you guys have probably seen this first paragraph before, because I teach this in all the foundational classes, where you are understanding what the Buddha is teaching you is that you are the owner of your Kamma, the heir of your Kamma. You have Kamma as your origin. What he's saying here is you're the one who creates your own Kamma. It's not possible for other people to create Kamma for you. So it's not like somebody can say, oh, don't rub your unwholesome Kamma off on me, or I'm going to rub my unwholesome Kamma off on you. This isn't actually possible. It's the decisions that you're making that's leading to either wholesome or unwholesome results, or wholesome or unwholesome Kamma. And now the Buddha's going to talk about how practicing these precepts are going to help you to experience an improved rebirth. Now remember, that's not the goal of the teachings of the Buddha, but he's needing to teach this cause and effect and helping people to understand how one experiences rebirth in all these different realms, because it's part of the teachings and it is the truth. It is what's truly happening. As you understand this, it can help you to understand what's going on in the world around you. So here he's talking about destruction of life and abstaining from that. And he's saying by somebody having done that, living compassionately towards all living beings, that they do not creep along. What he's talking about here is creeping would be like trying to hide the actions that you do. Like if you've ever thought back to a time where maybe you've been doing unwholesome things and you maybe tried to hide those things from other people, that would be creeping along. So if someone does not creep along by body, speech, and mind, that means that you're freely comfortable with other people knowing what you're doing in terms of your bodily actions, your verbal actions, and your mental actions, that you have nothing to hide, that you're not creeping because you're practicing these teachings closely and you have no issues with other people knowing about the things that you're choosing to do or not do, because you know you're not causing any harm. And for somebody who's choosing to practice in this way, what the Buddha is saying is that your rebirth is straight, because your Kamma is leading to this improvement, because you've made these wise decisions about your body, speech, and mind based on the natural law of Kamma. And now, if you're going to be reborn, it's straight, meaning that it's not going to take you down into the lower realms, because now you're practicing as a better and better human being. And that's where he says, okay, this straight rebirth is going to lead to either rebirth in the heavenly realm or in influential families if you come back to the human realm. And the reason why that is even helpful, to be reborn in a family that is influential or affluent or having great wealth and property, is because if you're on this path to enlightenment, there's going to be certain obstacles for you to overcome. And if you had to worry about where's your next meal coming from, where you're going to get your clothes from, and these kinds of things, that would hinder you from being able to spend time to learn these teachings, meditate, and all these other things, because now you're just trying to figure out how to sustain your life, in terms of your shelter, your medical care, and things like this. So if you're born into a family that has more material wealth, that's one less obstacle that you need to be concerned about on your way to enlightenment. And now, as he talks about this rebirth, he says, okay, having been reborn, contact affects one. What he's talking about here is contact through the 6 sense bases of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. That's part of what you experience as part of your rebirth, that you're going to have sensual desire in the mind, where the mind's longing, yearning through these sense bases. And if you have agreeable contact, you get those pleasant feelings. And if you have disagreeable contact, you get the painful feelings. This is where the mind is craving permanently agreeable contact, wanting things to be pleasing. And when it doesn't experience that, that's where the mind now experiences the painful feelings. So the contact that you experience is going to produce discontentedness if you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind. And every being that's ever been born has craving, desire, attachment. So there's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, and displeasure as long as there's birth. If there's birth, there's going to be aging and death, and there's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. But getting to this path and cultivating the mind, eliminating your cravings, then even when you experience contact, you can maintain your peacefulness and joy. But you got to get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments. If you hear things that are agreeable to you or disagreeable to you, you're going to experience either conditioned pleasant feelings or painful feelings. And it's those cravings in the mind that your mind is discerning, trying to determine what is agreeable or disagreeable. But when you train your mind to eliminate your cravings, it's neither agreeable or disagreeable contact, it's just contact. But as long as the mind is in the unenlightened state, this contact is going to affect you. Okay, so that's what the Buddha is saying here. And then he essentially has the same thing to teach related to the other precepts as well, particularly the stealing and the sexual misconduct. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular discourse. This is one is reborn through one's deeds. And it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am. Hello, Samantha. You're already unmuted.
Am I live?
Yeah, you're already unmuted. You didn't mute
Okay.
before.
About halfway through your discussion for this chapter, there is a paragraph that says, if the previous being generated significant amounts of wholesome Kamma.
Let's see, somewhere in here.
Keep going. In your explanation.
Oh, in my explanation. Okay.
Yes. Keep going. In the previous being. Okay.
Okay.
So what I understand from that, it says something about being reborn in a favorable destination, wealthy family, beautiful appearance or whatnot. So obviously there are a lot of, let's say, attractive people that we see walking around, but they don't necessarily have attractive attributes, as in they might have like what I would consider kind of an ugly personality. Like they might have been born into this life with a bit of an advantage, but it appears that they are not following through with that. So coming into a life with a leg up or a leg down, depending on what your previous Kamma is, it's pretty much up to you in this new life what type of Kamma you produce to either continue on that path or change course. Is that correct?
That's accurate, yeah. So if someone's born into a life where they have a beautiful or handsome physical appearance, that physical appearance is based on decisions they made in their previous life. That's what the body is its old Kamma. But now in the present life, they have decisions to make about what type of Kamma they're producing in this life. And that's where someone could have very wholesome old Kamma from their physical body in their previous life, but now in the present moment in this life, they've been making unwise decisions about their mind, and now their mind is going in deteriorating. So that's where if they're reborn, they could now be reborn into a lower destination, or they could be reborn back into the human realm. And now in this next life, maybe they're not so beautiful and not so handsome, and that's because of their Kamma from their current life now going forward into their next one.
And is this, I guess, effect of previous Kamma when you're reborn into a new being, is it fairly consistent? As in, let's say you see someone who's very beautiful or attractive, would one assume from that they had considerable good Kamma, kind of built up before then, and vice versa? If you see someone who's destitute, that they've in former lives had bad Kamma or poor decision making.
You don't have to assume.
Without being judgmental.
Yeah, you don't have to assume that. You can actually know that to be the case and know that to be true based on these teachings and based on any kind of independent verification that you have of these teachings. If you talk to people who are either handsome or attractive, or you talk to people who don't have that same type of physical appearance, if they've been able to observe their past lives, they will be able to confirm these kinds of things for you. Or even in your life, you could potentially get to that point too, where you could confirm it yourself. So you're not interested in assuming, but you can know the truth that yes, this is in fact the way that it's occurring.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Alberto and Martha put their hand down. They must have their question answered. So here, Janae is asking a question. What does Kamma as your resort mean? It's just another way of saying that this is the Kamma that you're creating, right? That you're the one who's going to create this, you're the one who's going to experience it. That's what it's essentially getting to. And the Buddha does this when he talks. He'll use multiple words that essentially are meaning the same thing, so that he gets to the point like detail, 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 detail. So it's like 3, 4, 5 words that are pointing to the exact same thing. So that way, as people learn his teachings in the future, they wouldn't be able to misunderstand his teachings. Whereas if he just said one word, like beings are the owners of their Kamma, and that's it, then people might try to figure that out and interpret that in different ways. But by saying 3, 4, 5 words that are all pointing to the same thing, then people will have less and less difficulties understanding what his actual teachings are. Okay, it looks like Martha or Alberto have a question. Go ahead, guys.
Okay. Yes. Going back to Samantha's points and questions, could it be the case that this is what we just read in the Pali Canon? There is some sort of like figurative language when it comes to what refers to beauty and wealth, because the concept of beauty changes from culture to culture and is relative, and and also even like the notion of the concept of wealth. So that's what I started to see this, because also there's, at least where I live, or I see many people who are born with a lot of wealth around them, but they still carry a lot of many unwholesome qualities in their mind. On the other hand, what I've seen in my life, and now that I'm more aware of the teachings of the Buddha, that there are some people who definitely don't know anything about the teachings of the Buddha, but they have the mental qualities. I mean, I know people who, I see that, they practice this generosity, they tend to be calm, they have equanimity in their lives, and they don't know anything about the teachings of the Buddha. To me, is that the case, that this is what people who actually carry, like wholesome karma from previous lives, but it's not based on materialistic wealth, more about mental qualities? I don't know if I explained myself well.
Yeah, there's two different things here. So let's just talk about the last one first. That the teachings of the Buddha, he's explaining the natural laws, and these natural laws affect us, whether we're aware of it or not. And you can learn these things through various venues. Like, even Jesus Christ taught, about the natural law of Kamma. He taught you reap what you sow. And he taught about, loving all beings. He said, love thy neighbor, and things like this. And maybe grandma, like when I grew up, she used to tell me, like, if you don't have anything good to say, just don't say anything at all, right? So these teachings, they're natural laws, and they're affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And the Buddha is just explaining what those natural laws are. So you can meet people who don't know anything about the Buddha, or even that there is such thing as a Buddha, but they learned these natural laws in one way or another in some part of their life, whether it was a boss or a family member, a grandmother, a grandfather, an uncle, an aunt, or a business management class that might have learned about certain communication styles. So people can learn these things in different venues, but they're not going to be able to put together what it takes to get to enlightenment in all those different ways, because the Buddha is giving you the complete package of exactly how to get to enlightenment. But you can see people who are practicing things like right speech or right action or right intention, and their mind can be focused and concentrated, and that's confirmation for you that these are natural laws. It's not just like learn the teachings of the Buddha and that's it. Yes, an individual would do very well learning the teachings of the Buddha, but if they learn these things in other ways, they're still learning the natural laws. They're just learning it through a different mechanism or a different platform or a different tradition or something like this. Here, where the Buddha is talking about wealth and property and stuff, he is talking about wealth in terms of monetary wealth and material wealth. And the reason why is because if someone's reborn into a rich or wealthy family, as I mentioned, that you're going to have less obstacles to be able to get access to these teachings versus someone who's not. And he's helping you to be able to see why these things happen. And the thing that this helps you with is kind of what Samantha was hitting on too, is like as you go around the world and you see things, you'll understand exactly why that is. Sometimes people think like, oh, why is that person rich and not me? Or why was he born into that family and not me? Or why do they look so great and not me? You know, people worry about these kinds of things. And you can understand the natural law of Kamma that, oh, this person that was born into that family, that's because of their Kamma from their previous life, whether it was wholesome Kamma or unwholesome Kamma. And this can help you to understand beings that are being born into poverty and things like this. And we're never judgmental of those things, but it just helps you to understand why the world is functioning the way it is. And it even adds some more importance to what it is that you're doing on this path. That, of course, your goal isn't to be reborn, but if you're learning and practicing this path and you happen to be reborn, you can have the reassurance that it's going to be an improved rebirth of where you're at, you know, in this particular life. And it's not just because you've learned the teachings of the Buddha, it's because you've learned the natural laws and you're functioning now based on these natural laws. So when you're experiencing a rebirth, you'll be experiencing an improved rebirth should you need to experience that. But the ultimate goal would be to get to enlightenment in this life, and then there's no rebirth anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
But if the wealth where someone is born to in the new, the rebirth comes from an unwholesome life. I mean, for the word life size, like is this like is lifestyle? No, it's not lifestyle. Sorry, I forgot the word. The livelihood. It comes from a wholesome livelihood. Let's say you are reborn to a family that they have all this money from a plantation from the times of slavery, and then this money has passed like 2 or 3 generations after, and they're still making money, in businesses that pollute the environment or exploit workers, but you live with a big amount of wealth. So that's what I struggle, that you are rewarded in your new rebirth by living with all this luxury around you that comes from unwholesome livelihood. So
you shouldn't think about it as a reward. Like the Buddha isn't telling you about any kind of beliefs or opinions or views. He's explaining to you why people are reborn into a family that has more wealth or more property. And having experienced that, an individual is now going to be better off in terms of not having to overcome that obstacle of things like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. So he's not dangling a carrot and say, hey, do all these things so then you can be reborn in your next life in this way, because the ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment in this life and not be reborn anywhere. But if you're curious, if you were maybe reborn into a rich family, maybe you feel guilty about that, you can see that, no, these are decisions that you made in a previous life. Or if you weren't born into a rich family and you were born into very basic means, but you've been able to overcome that, you can understand why that has occurred. And whether the money was acquired in one way versus another, that's another aspect of Kamma. That's not what the Buddha is talking about here. That's a whole nother aspect of Kamma, but there's still Kamma associated with acquiring money in a certain way, but you're putting too many issues on top of each other instead of looking at this in a very clean way of what is the Buddha teaching. He's teaching you that by practicing the elimination of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, that there's this potential rebirth in an improved destination. And this is why this is occurring. Very simple, very clean line. Don't confuse it with, oh, well, what if the money came from here, it came from there? What does that mean? This is like putting too many things into it, where he's just helping you to be able to see why beings are reborn in a certain destination.
Okay, thank you, David.
You're welcome. We have some more questions coming in here from Robert in Zoom. What about if you're born into a wealthy, abusive family versus is a loving, poor family that supports better Kamma? Yeah, there's those options too, right? Those things are happening, and it's all based on your Kamma. This is where sometimes, we might sit around and be really upset about where we were reborn, not even understanding that there is rebirth, right? We might be hating our family or hating the situation that we're in. And the Buddha is just helping you to be able to see that what you're experiencing is a result of your decisions. And it's never just one way. This is where the mind thinks in absolutes. So when I say that you're born into a wealthy family and this removes the obstacle of having to have food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, that is true, right? But then there's other concerns as well, like you're saying, like maybe people are very cold and, backstabbing and things like this. Yeah, there's those kinds of things too, but you guys need to be able to see it very clearly and cleanly of what the Buddha is teaching you here, and don't mix in a whole bunch of other things, because yes, that is part of the natural law of Kamma, but you got to keep it clean and be able to see what he's actually teaching you of why beings are reborn into a particular family. And he's giving you the parameters for that. And then Robert says, it is helpful to have a reason for all these things that people wonder about, so you don't have to worry or think about it anymore. But still, wondering about the impact on your life from a wholesome versus unwholesome family versus a rich versus a poorer family. Not sure what you're thinking there, Robert. If you'd like to unmute, you're welcome to. And you're welcome to explain, and I can help you further if you like.
Okay. No, I think the way you've sort of explained it has been helpful to me. I think it is, first of all, helpful to just have a reason for all these things that people wonder about. So why am I in this place versus somebody else? Kamma. So you don't have to decide that. And then for all these different things about wealth versus not wealth versus all these things, it's more about are you born into a situation that supports this path versus doesn't support this path, which may or may not involve money, which may so if I can frame it like that, that helps me a little bit more than just saying it's based on the bank account of the family you're born into. It's more like the situation that you're born into supporting you getting to enlightenment. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's always multiple criteria, right? And the Buddha here is just talking about one particular aspect, right? It doesn't mean that if you're born into a rich family, it's going to be easy for you to get to enlightenment. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you here. But sometimes that's the way that the mind thinks about it, is it thinks in these absolutes. But you need to be able to see that he's just teaching you one aspect of rebirth and why beings are reborn into a wealthy family. And then I added that part for you guys to understand that the reason why this is considered to be an improved rebirth is because by not needing to worry about money, you can now, if you choose, focus on the path. Doesn't mean everybody's going to do that. That would be permanence if everybody did that. But that is the potential that somebody has, and that's why it's considered to be an improved rebirth.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me just check Facebook and YouTube. Looks like Mayu Lee has a question. Having Kamma as their relatives, does the Buddha mean the family members they were born with? No, what he's talking about here is that this is like yours. It's your Kamma. Just like this is my mom, this is my dad, this is my sister. This Kamma is my relative. It's mine. It belongs to me. That's what he's teaching, and just giving those multiple words to be able to help you see that. Okay, I see someone here on YouTube. You're not asking a question, so nothing to answer there. All right, so I don't see anything else. So let's move to the next chapter. This is chapter 33. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
One is reborn through one's creeping deeds. Monks, I will teach you a discourse of the teachings on creeping. Listen and attend closely. And what, monks, is that discourse of the teachings on creeping? Monks, beings are the owners of their Dhamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, unwholesome or wholesome, they are its heirs. Here, someone destroys life. He is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. He creeps along by body, speech, and mind. His bodily Kamma is crooked. His verbal Kamma is crooked. His mental Kamma is crooked. His destination is crooked. His rebirth is crooked. But for one with a crooked destination and rebirth, I say, there is one of two destinations, either the exclusive painful hells or a species of creeping animal. And what are the species of creeping animals? The snake, the scorpion, the centipede, the mongoose, the cat, the mouse, and the owl, or any other animal that creep away when they see people. Thus a being is reborn from a being. One is reborn through one's deeds. When one has been reborn, contacts affect one. It is in this way, I say, that beings are their heirs of their Dhamma. The Tathagata spoke of taking what is not given and engages in sexual misconduct with discourses similar to that of taking life. He also spoke of the fourfold misconduct of speech and the threefold misconduct of mind in the same way.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So this is essentially just the opposite of what we were just reading. This is someone who's creeping along, right? They're trying to hide the things that they do because they're not interested in other beings to understand what it is that they're doing. And then they're involved in this unwholesome moral conduct through body, speech, and mind. And now because their Kamma is crooked, the Buddha is saying that their rebirth is crooked too. And they're reborn into the realms here of the animal realm and also of hell as well. It's important to understand whenever you see these kinds of things that the Buddha never is guilting, shaming, or fearing anybody into learning and practicing these teachings. He's just explaining true reality, because these kinds of things that you see here, these are very minimal in his teachings. When you get into the book 11, volume 11, you'll see the cycle of rebirth, and he talks about these things in relationship to the various lower realms. But the vast majority of his teachings are to help you understand how to get to enlightenment and escape the cycle of rebirth. But he's also helping you to be able to see this rebirth and why beings move into the lower realms of hell, animal, afflicted spirits. Even he talks about rebirth in the human and heavenly realm, because you need to be able to understand those things. What are the things that are leading to one particular thing or another? And the way that this is all working is one of the ways you can see this is that in a human life, if you're killing or stealing or having sexual misconduct, for example, those are things that animals do, right? In the animal realm, they kill, they steal, they have sexual misconduct. So in the human realm, if your consciousness is functioning that way and you're repeatedly doing those kinds of things, you're going to need to be reborn down in those realms so you can do a lot of those kinds of things and extinguish those cravings. And that's how you ultimately will make your way back up to the human realm or the heavenly realm. And we've all been there, I'm sure, in one way or another in these lower realms, and now we've made our way here. But just because someone's made their way into the human realm, they don't start off with a clean consciousness, that their mind still has some of these cravings. So this is why an individual in the human realm could still choose to do some of these things. And if an individual does that, then that's where they're going to be reborn into the lower realms. And the Buddha's helping you just to be able to see what that is. Whether someone chooses to do that or not, it's up to them. Remember, a Buddha's already gotten to the peace and the joy. They're not trying to convince anybody or coerce anybody to learn their teachings. They're not doing those kinds of things. Just saying, hey, here's the teachings. This is what it is. And you'll be able to independently verify this as your mind's moving closer and closer. If you have observation of your past lives, or you start to penetrate into the cycle of rebirth and be able to see and confirm these things, you'll know that they're actually true. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. So it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, you can tell me if this will just be covered in, it sounds like maybe a future book, in which case I can just wait. But the species of creeping animal. So I'm wondering, how is it that something in the animal realm is able to produce good Dhamma for a better rebirth if most of the actions of an animal are based on natural instincts? Like how do you overcome that?
Yeah, the things that are happening in the animal realm are based on craving, desire, attachment in their mind, but they're also based on necessity too. Like a snake has to kill in order to eat, or else it won't survive. Same thing with like a lion or things like this. The way that you overcome this is that you bounce around in countless rebirths within an animal realm, and now you ultimately end up getting into better and better animal existences. So like a rabbit or an elephant or a turtle or things like this that tend to not be very aggressive and hostile and bitter. The mind has improved within the animal existences. It is possible to go from like a snake or a tiger into the human realm, but it's not as common. But this is why you can see an individual who's born into the human realm, and maybe from the age of 12 or 18, they were showing signs of being a mass murderer, and they ultimately were a serial murderer. This is an individual who most likely was in one of those existences, like a lion or a tiger or something like this, and they were reborn into the human realm, and now they're still actively killing, right? And they still have that craving to kill. And now that individual, having acted upon that in this realm, is going to most likely be reborn down into the hell realm or perhaps the animal realm again. So you can overcome the consciousness and the cravings that are in the consciousness, because that's what's motivating this behavior, by being reborn into multiple rebirths within the animal realm. So it's never really just one animal existence. The Buddha describes the animal realm like a prison, because once you're there, you need to have countless rebirths in order to be able to burn off enough of your unwholesome karma to be able to make your way into like a human existence. But there will be countless existences in that animal realm before a being makes their way into the human realm.
So, for instance, the scorpion that kills, for sustenance and without thinking, without, harmful intent. He does it because that's what he has to survive. His next rebirth, because he was acting upon natural instincts and without the intention of, I guess, ill will, he will more likely be a less aggressive, less creeping animal.
I would like to help you with some of the things that you're sharing here and saying is that a scorpion is acting with intention. They are acting with ill will. This instinct that you're thinking of, this is actually intentional acts that they're choosing to do. And of course, as a scorpion, this is what they have to do in order to sustain their life. But there is a certain action. There is thinking that they're doing. They're intending to kill in order to be able to eat. And of course, that's the reason why they're doing it. Because in order for there to be Kamma generated, there has to be intention behind it. Whereas if the scorpion was just walking down the street and accidentally bumped into a being and stung it and killed it with its poison, then there's no Kamma with that. But a scorpion is intending to inflict this harm on this other being for its own benefit because of its cravings, right? It's longing, yearning, it's wanting to live and exist in this world, and it's trying to do that the best way that it knows how, which is eating this other being. So there's going to be craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind of that scorpion to be able to then do that. And now, if that scorpion is reborn, which it would need to be reborn because it's in the human realm, it's either going to be reborn into another animal existence, or it could go down to hell, it could go up to afflicted spirits, it could even come into the human realm, and it can even go into the heavenly realm. There's situations that the Buddha talks about where beings even in the hell realm are born into a heavenly existence. So it's not like you have to go through a sequence of events to get any particular place. It's very rare for beings to go from hell and animal all the way up to the heavenly realm or into the human realm directly, but it can happen.
It seems that for animals, it's very difficult for them to progress to an improved rebirth. We'll just stick with the scorpion. It's, as far as we know, that they don't really have the ability to say, okay, I really shouldn't kill. Like maybe I should eat, plants instead. It just seems very difficult to get out of this animal realm.
Exactly. And that's exactly what the Buddha teaches. Like being in the animal realm is like a prison. And that's why you're having countless existences in the animal realm. The Buddha describes that too. And for anybody who's seen their past lives, they can attest to that as well, that there's these countless existences. You're bouncing around to many different animals before you ever make your way back to existence like a human. And that's why the Buddha teaches that this human existence is so important and so ideal that you shouldn't let it go to waste. You shouldn't become complacent, that you should really treasure this human existence, because we've made our way out of the animal realm. Let's not go back, because once you're there, it's very hard to get back out.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David, I had a question about the previous chapter, so if Jenny had a question, she can go ahead and maybe ask you later.
It's okay. We can do this one now.
So this is maybe a perception, but I'm just wondering, just based on what my experience is, that at least this is what I've seen in my life in India, is mostly that people who have less resources and they're born with less resources are more likely to go and, because they are more discontent because of their lack of resources and the amount of effort they have to put into getting resources, they seem to be more likely to go on the path of holy life and trying to find how they can improve their mental state. There's one reason. I'm not saying that's always reason. So a lot of people who are like in India, who are in the villages, or even in, I'm not sure it's the same case in Thailand, but people like Ajahn Chah and all, they came from villages who had very little meager resources. And I know you talked about one gentleman who was in a very poor area of Thailand who was enlightened. So I'm wondering if, even though, I guess what I'm trying to understand is those things don't seem to map to, when somebody is born with a lot more resources, it probably takes them a longer time to get to a place where they go and search for improving the condition of the mind. And seems that people who have less resources are more likely to go and find a way to, go move towards a holy life, because they have little resources for the material pleasures. So I just want to question what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure where you came in, Vibhav, but you're also adding a whole bunch of things into this that aren't actually there and that's not being taught. What the Buddha is teaching you here is that if you're experiencing these particular things, this is what's going to lead to that rebirth. So why are beings born into a family that's rich or wealthy in property and gold and silver? Well, it's because of these things. This is why they're reborn there. And then the piece that I've added for you guys, because this is talking about an improved destination, what I've added for you guys is that by having more wealth and property and gold and silver, there's less obstacles for you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. What you're talking about is, once beings are reborn, do they choose to walk towards enlightenment or not? That's not what the Buddha's talking about here. You guys are confusing it and putting a whole bunch of other things in there that's not in the discourse and is not what I'm teaching. And that's what's leading to you guys thinking this way. But if what you're observing is you think that that's what you've seen, is that beings who are more poverty stricken, that they tend to get on the path more readily, or beings that are more rich or more wealthy, they tend to not do that. This maps into what I've taught in terms of these realms, right? That I talk about how the heavenly realm, beings tend to be complacent because they don't experience many hardships. They don't have those painful feelings. They have exclusively pleasant feelings, so that tends to promote complacency. So what you're describing here, if that's what you've observed, then that maps into what I've shared, is that sometimes people look at the hardships that they experience in their day-to-day life as being the motivating factors that lead them towards the path to enlightenment. So be sure you're not confusing why someone chooses to go to enlightenment versus what's being taught here. This is not that kind of teaching.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And what I'll add there is that the Buddha never describes, and you can't really generalize, that people who are rich and wealthy don't go to the path to enlightenment, and people who are having less resources do go to the path to enlightenment. If that was the case, then this would be permanence. Instead, you'll see people who are rich and wealthy who go on the path to enlightenment and people who don't. And then you'll see people who are impoverished who go to the path to enlightenment and people who don't. You'll see it all these different ways. And maybe in your experience, you've seen more of one thing versus another, but you need to always be able to understand that we can't generalize. Because of impermanence, there's always going to be, a little bit of each in all these kinds of situations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now back to this particular chapter. Janae, you had a question?
So I was wondering, can you scroll down a little bit?
Sure.
Where it says, when one has been reborn, contact affects one. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, this is what I was talking about in the last discourse, that if you're reborn and you have central desire in the mind, which is what a reborn being is going to have, then now as you experience contact through the 6 sense bases of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself, it's going to affect you because you're going to experience discontentedness due to your cravings in your mind. As you experience contact through your doorways of eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body and mind, now that's going to affect you, either having conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant.
So this is kind of like with dependent origination of if you're reborn, you'll have the 6 sense basis, and then you'll have the contact and then the craving.
Exactly. If there's rebirth, there's going to be aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. And what's the precursor for that? What's the condition that's leading to that discontentedness? It's rebirth, yes, because if we weren't reborn, we wouldn't be experiencing aging, death, and discontentedness. But then it's this contact, that because there's contact, that's where the discontentedness is now being experienced, because there's craving in the mind. With this contact, now an individual's going to experience discontentedness.
And then with that, when it says contact affects one, is that basically saying that you're the heir of your Kamma?
That is up and above, but yes, if you're choosing not to get to enlightenment in your previous life, then you are experiencing the results of your Kamma, which is a new life. And now in that new life, by experiencing contact through the sense bases, you're now experiencing your Kamma because your mind's discontent. But that's where you get to the point where you've purified your mind, and now you're experiencing wholesome Kamma, because as an enlightened being, you're still experiencing contact through the 6 sense bases, but you're not experiencing discontentedness. So yes, rebirth is your Kamma. Now that you experience this contact, if you are discontent, that's your Kamma too, because you haven't purified your mind. Every single thing you experience is Kamma, a result of your decisions. So if someone's mind is peaceful or someone's mind is angry and frustrated, that's a decision that being is making. Oftentimes, these things, as you guys have heard me share, people blame on other people, but it's ultimately a decision that an individual is making of to be happy or to be sad. That's a decision that the individual being is making based on whether they actually trained their mind to get to that unconditioned happiness and joy, or whether they haven't trained their mind and now they're experiencing the anger and the sadness and frustration.
Okay, thank you.
All these things are Kamma. All right. So I don't see any other questions anywhere. All right. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 34. It looks like Pat's volunteering for that one. Go ahead, sir.
At minimum leads to deeds. Monks, the destruction of life, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum leads to a short lifespan. Taking what is not given, repeatedly pursued, perused, developed and cultivated leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human, being taken what is not given at minimum leads to loss of wealth. Sexual misconduct, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, sexual misconduct at minimum leads to hostility and competition. False speech, repeatedly perused, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, argumentative speech at minimum leads to being separated from one's friends. Harsh speech, repeatedly developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, harsh speech at minimum leads to disagreeable sounds. Idle chatter, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, idle chatter at minimum leads to others distrusting one's words. Drinking liquor and wine, ingestion of substances that cause heedlessness, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a being, drinking liquor and wine, ingestion of substances that cause heedlessness, at minimum, leads to madness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, this is a very rare discourse where the Buddha is actually showing you the real direct cause and effect of certain actions that you could take and the result of those things. And as you guys know, you're never interested in believing anything that the Buddha teaches you. You would like to be able to independently verify this. So if he's saying this is the truth, and you should be able to independently verify it. So what you do is you start looking around the world to see if this is true. Whereas if an individual is repeatedly destroying life, meaning killing, does this lead to a shorter lifespan? Well, you can look no further than like war, right? Because that's a place where people are repeatedly killing. And you can see 18, 20, 30-year-old individuals that are dying so young, right? Or like I grew up with some people who were into some really unwholesome things, and they were actually murdering other human beings, and they got murdered themselves. You know, this one really good friend of mine was standing in a telephone booth, and they walked up with a shotgun, and boom, you know, they blew him to pieces, right? Because of the killing that he did at 17, 18 years old, he got killed right there in the phone booth. So you can see these things are actually true. And any of these things that you might have done, you can see it really clearly. Maybe you've done some sexual misconduct, or maybe you've had sex with lots of different people, and maybe those people found out and you experienced some hostility, and there was this competition between them, right? So you could go through each one of these and be able to independently verify this. I know many of us have indulged in substances that cause heedlessness, and you can see that that absolutely led to madness, right? So this is an opportunity for you to go through these things and be able to see the cause and effect and why the Buddha is teaching these wise decisions of what would be wise to do one thing or the other. And now you can independently verify these things, because then that helps you to reassure you why you're practicing these things, because you should be able to see in each one of these things that he's talking about why it's unwise. And now he's helping you to be able to see that, and then you can independently verify it, build confidence in his teachings, and now this will inform your practice where you know, like, I'm not interested in stealing because this is going to lead to loss of wealth. And the Buddha here is talking about rebirth, being reborn in hell, the animal realm, and afflicted spirits. And if you're reborn in the human realm, what that actually leads to. But you can actually see that these things lead to the same thing here, that if I were to steal in this particular life, people are going to end up stealing from me too. And I might get caught and go to jail and have to pay lawyers to defend me. It's going to lead to a loss of wealth by choosing to steal, not just in this rebirth that the Buddha is talking about, but even in your existing life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like Janae has a question, so go ahead, ma'am.
So I've seen this multiple times within his teachings where he'll use the word madness, and I was just curious if there's like more information on that.
Yeah, you can just look it up as a common understanding, because these words were all chosen based on our current understanding of language and what he spoke during his life. So if you look up that word madness, you'll see the definition for it.
So it's nothing like specific. It's just like general madness.
Madness can be like anger and frustration. It can also be madness, like the mind is kind of crazy and imploding on itself. That can also be madness.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me check if we have anything anywhere else. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So let's move to the next one. This is chapter 35. Someone like to read this? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir. And then Robert, looks like we'll come to you next.
Indebtedness is discontentedness in the world. Poverty is called discontentedness in the world. So too is getting into debt. A poor person who becomes indebted is troubled with enjoying himself. When they prosecute him and he also incurs imprisonment, this imprisonment is indeed discontentedness for one yearning for gain and sensual pleasures. Just so in the noble one's discipline, one in whom confidence is lacking, who sees no danger in wrongdoing and brash, heaps up a mass of evil and wholesome karma. Having engaged in misconduct of body, speech, and mind, he forms a wish, may no one find out about me. He twists around with his body, twists around by speech or mind. He piles up his evil, unwholesome deeds, in one way or another, repeatedly. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, is a poor person who falls into debt, troubled while enjoying himself. His thoughts then prosecute him. Painful mental states born of remorse follow him wherever he goes, whether in the village or the forest. This unwise evildoer, knowing his own misdeeds, goes to certain animal realm or is even bound in hell. This indeed is the discontentedness of bondage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So there's kind of two sections to this discourse, and you can understand both of them. This first one, he's talking about just like a person who is impoverished, goes into debt, and essentially they're experiencing this enjoyment while they're actually troubling themselves, right? So here, what you can understand is by going into debt, if you've ever gone into a significant amount of debt, you probably noticed there was a lot of stress and anxiety there, knowing that you owe somebody else money, and now you're having to drag yourself to work each day to be able to acquire enough money to be able to pay off this debt. So going into debt is unwise because it's going to produce all this stress and anxiety. And of course, there is things like good debt, right? Like if you have a certain investment in a home, this can help you to be able to build wealth. But then there's like debt where you're just charging up credit cards and things like this, and this can be very stressful for the mind. So getting out of debt is one of the most freeing and liberating things that you could ever do. But just like this individual who goes into debt is enjoying themselves because they're having all this craving, desire, attachment to get these things, and they're getting all these conditioned pleasant feelings, but yet on the backside they're producing all this discontentedness. They're heaping up all this discontentedness. The same thing is true as an individual is having a lack of confidence. Whenever you see that someone's having a lack of confidence, what the Buddha is saying is the lack of confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. When an individual is lacking confidence in his teachings, then an individual doesn't understand the natural laws. They don't know the natural laws of existence and the natural law of Kamma. And because of that, they see no danger in wrongdoing. So in this situation, because of their lack of wisdom, they haven't cultivated the wisdom of the natural laws because they lack confidence in the teachings of these natural laws. They don't see any danger in making these unwise decisions, so they go through the world making a bunch of unwise decisions, and now they heap up this whole massive amount of unwholesome karma. And they're doing this through body, speech, and mind, right? And this is what we might have done in the past. I know I did, right? You just plow through the world, as I say, knocking down trees and burning up the forest, not even realizing what you're actually doing. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see what an individual is experiencing and why that is. So when you gain more and more confidence in these teachings and you study them more and more deeply, what you're studying is the natural laws. And these are things that you can independently verify. And now you'll walk through the world and you'll make decisions in a different way than you would have in the past. I was actually at a store today purchasing something, and they actually ended up having to wait. I probably waited like 45 minutes to an hour because the person that I needed help from, they were actually helping another customer. And I know that in the past, I would have never just sat there and been calm and just waited until they were done with this other person. I would have been angry and hostile, like, who do you think you are, not giving me service, right? Like, not here in Thailand, but when I was in America, this would be a typical way that we would think. Can you imagine sitting in a store for 45 minutes to an hour and not actually having somebody service you? Like, this person helped me, but then he had to go off and help this other customer, and he told me I was going to need to wait. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And you can just be calm and patient. But if you don't know these teachings, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile and impolite and disrespectful and talking in negative ways to this individual who's just trying to do their job. So when you have wisdom of these natural laws, you function differently. Maybe you wait. Maybe you're like, hey, you know what? I don't have time to wait. How about we come back another time and I'll talk to you another time? That's an option too, right? But the last thing you're interested in doing is being bitter, harsh, and hostile in these situations. So let me know what questions you guys have here about this particular discourse. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we go to chapter 36. Would someone like to read this one? Oh, this was Robert. Go ahead, sir.
4 kinds of persons. At Savanthi, the perfectly enlightened one then said to King Pasenadi of Kosala, Great King, there are these 4 kinds of persons found existing in the world. What 4? The one heading from darkness to darkness, the one heading from darkness to light, the one heading from light to darkness, the one heading from light to light. And how, Great King, is a person one heading from darkness to darkness? Here, some person has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, bamboo workers, hunters, cartwrights, or waste collectors, a poor family in which there is little food and drink and which subsists with difficulty, one where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is unsightly, deformed, chronically blind, or cripple-handed, or lame or paralyzed. He's not one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lightning. He engages in misconduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so with the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the netherworld, in hell. Suppose, Great King, a man would go from darkness to darkness, or from gloom to gloom, or from stain to stain. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, Great King, that a person is one heading from darkness to darkness. And how, Great King, is a person one heading from darkness to light? Here, some person is reborn into a low family, a family of kandalas, bamboo workers, hunters, cartwrights, or waste collectors.
One moment.
A poor family in which there is little food and drink, and which subsists with difficulty. One where food and clothing.
One moment, Robert. Just give me a second. One moment, Robert. Let me just take care of something here. All right. Let's go back to you, Robert. You should be able to see that now. Do you see that?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, sir. I think you're...
One is heading from darkness to light.
Yep.
Here, some person has been reborn in a low family, a family of kandalas, bamboo workers, hunters, cartwrights, or waste collectors. A family in which there is little food and drink, and which subsists with difficulty. One where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, deformed, chronically blind, or cripple-handed, or lame or paralyzed. He is not one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands and scents and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. Suppose, Great King, a man would climb from the ground onto a palanquin, or from a palanquin onto horseback, or from horseback to an elephant mount, or from an elephant mount to a mansion. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, Great King, that a person is one heading from darkness to light. And how, Great King, is a person one heading from light to darkness? Here, some person has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Katiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one which is rich, with great wealth and property, with abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, and possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He is one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so with the breakup of the body, after death he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in another world, in hell. Suppose, great king, a man would descend from a mansion to an elephant mount, or from an elephant mount to horseback, or from horseback to a palanquin, or from a palanquin to the ground, or from the ground to underground darkness. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, great king, that a person is one heading from light to darkness. And how, great king, is a person one heading from light to light? Here some person has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Katiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one which is rich, with great wealth and property, with abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, with abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty and complexion. He is one who gains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. Having done so with the breakup of the body, after death he is reborn in a good destination, heavenly world. Suppose, great king, a man would cross over from palanquin to palanquin, or from horseback to horseback, or from elephant to mount, or elephant mount to elephant mount, from mansion to mansion. This person, I say, is exactly similar. It is in this way, king, that a person is one heading from light to light. These, great king, are the four kinds of persons found existing in the world.
All right, thank you, Robert. I'm going to unlock our meeting here because it was wonderful when you guys all had your cameras on pretty much. So feel free to do that again. You should be able to open those up if you like. So I just had to shut down some of the things that were happening. So let me help you guys to understand this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory for those of you guys that session of the book. There we go. Okay. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is one thing that I'll share is that whenever you see the Buddha saying that there's these four kinds of persons, because he says this in other places, he'll say there's these six kinds of persons. He's never saying that these are the only four kinds of persons in the world, right? He's just saying, hey, here's like four situations that one can experience. And this is something that Vibhav was just kind of talking about in terms of his experience. This is someone who's in darkness and headed to darkness, right? And that's a possibility of an individual being in the darkness and headed towards more darkness. And here the Buddha's talking about an individual who's born into a family that's lacking resources and struggling, and they're continuing to walk towards the darkness. But then he's talking about an individual who's in the darkness, but now they're headed towards the light. And Vibhav, you said that you saw that this was something pretty prevalent, but here you can see the Buddha's talking about this other option as well, of darkness to darkness. But then you can also have people who are born into the light, meaning that they're born into a more affluent family, and now they're headed towards darkness and doing more and more unwholesome things. And then you can also have people who are born into a more wholesome situation, a more affluent family, and they're headed towards enlightenment. These are the four things. And this is why I mentioned to you that it would be unwise to kind of generalize, because these are the four ways that an individual can experience life. These are the four types of situations that one could potentially experience. Whether you're born into a difficult situation or an affluent situation, you could be either headed towards the darkness or you could be headed towards the light. Which direction you walk is completely your choice. And the Buddha is just giving you a discourse and a simile to be able to help you understand that here. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 36. Okay, looks like Vibhav, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Just a comment. I think the videos, I'm not able to start the video still.
Okay, let me see if I can get back to opening that up. Now you guys should be able to do that. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to.
Yeah, that was really nice when you guys had all your cameras on. So those of you guys that are on live stream, you're not seeing the Zoom. There was just a bunch of people that chose to come in and try to wreck our Zoom session, but they weren't able to. Okay, so let me see if we have any questions here. Not seeing any questions anywhere, so let's move on to the next chapter, 37. Is there someone? Let's see, actually, I can cover this one. This is chapter 37. This is the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is here in this book of the Natural Law of Kamma because it's the Eightfold Path that is extinguishing all your unwholesome Kamma. By learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, and practicing it closely, that's what will extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. So here, instead of putting the title, The Eightfold Path, it's the path to attain the ending of unwholesome Kamma. It's the Eightfold Path. And usually when we get to this point where the Eightfold Path shows up multiple times in volumes 2 through 13, I just see if you guys have any questions about the Eightfold Path at all, because it's such a core and fundamental teaching that you guys have all learned in the foundational classes that I'd just like to be sure to see if you guys have any questions, that you're welcome to ask those. So it looks like Janae has one. Go ahead, ma'am.
So something that I frequently think about with the Eightfold Path is the distinction between eliminating the discontentedness from your mind and from your life. And basically when it says the path to attain the ending of unwholesome Kamma, is it's basically saying that you can't get to enlightenment if these unwholesome things are coming to you in your life.
You need to be able to make sure you understand what is unwholesome, right? So I'll give an example. I don't think you were in the recent class, and Vibhav asked me questions about this, is that a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago now, I was driving down the road in my motorbike, and then I switched lanes. Right? And when I switched lanes, this person was just laying on the horn. They did not want me in that lane whatsoever, right? And so when I say, oh, this was unwholesome Kamma. No, this wasn't unwholesome Kamma. This was an individual who was behind me who was choosing to beep their horn because they had craving, desire, attachment. My mind the whole time, no fear, no frustration, no anger, no hostility. I kept on driving. They were still laying on their horn. Eventually they got over in the next lane, rode up beside me, wound down their window, were doing all these gestures out the window. They weren't a Thai person, by the way, because generally Thai people don't tend to function that way, although I'm sure there's someone somewhere that does that. But this individual then cut in front of me, and as he was making his way to cut in front of me, I'd already started reducing the acceleration so that I understood that having contact with this person was unwise. So when they were behind me beeping and honking, I was just going straight because there was nowhere for me to go. And then when they got over in the lane next to me, that's when I started to reduce the accelerator. So in this situation, the unwholesome Kamma would have been, if I had craving, desire, attachment in my mind, I would have then made an unwise decision that would have led to unwholesome results. Say I would have given him a gesture with my middle finger, and then he would have maybe crashed into me. Or say I would have started yelling and hollering back at him. These are decisions that I made that would have led to him maybe escalating what he chose to do. Or if I had craving, desire, attachment in my mind, I might have been angry or frustrated or agitated in this situation. So getting to the elimination of your unwholesome Kamma doesn't mean that everybody around you is going to function perfectly. Your Kamma isn't based on how other people are functioning. It's based on what you're experiencing. So in that situation, I didn't experience any unwholesome Kamma, because what unwholesome Kamma would have been is harm coming to me. And I didn't experience any harm that day because I didn't make any decisions based on craving, anger, and ignorance. But if I had made decisions based on craving, anger, and ignorance, like giving him the middle finger or something like that, there's a very good chance that harm would have come to me. So when we talk about no unwholesome Kamma coming to you, the way that people tend to interpret that is that there's nothing like this that's ever going to happen to you. That's not what unwholesome Kamma is necessarily. Like during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were people that were trying to kill him. There was at least 2 incidences in the Pali Canon where people were trying to actually kill him. But he didn't experience any harm in that situation because his mind was calm and he didn't make any unwise decisions that would have led to his death. But that doesn't mean that other people are going to just treat you magnificently and roll out the red carpet. That's not what unwholesome Kamma is in terms of your elimination of unwholesome karma. You'll eliminate any harm that's coming to you in terms of your material possessions, your physical body, and things like this. You'll eliminate any of that kind of harm, but there's still going to be things like this that are occurring, but your mind is going to be unaffected by it. And when they do happen, they're going to be very few, very minimal, and very far between. Like, this is the first time this kind of thing has happened to me in a very long time. But even when I'm teaching at the temple, there's probably once, twice, maybe 3 times a year where there's a brand new person who comes in. They're bitter, harsh, and hostile. They're angry. They're egotistical. This isn't unwholesome karma, because in that situation, I'm completely calm, I'm completely content. This person is choosing to act that way, and now my mind is fully protected. I'm not experiencing any unwholesome results in that situation. So it's important to understand that it doesn't mean that you'll never experience these things. It just means that your mind is going to be fully protected and you're not going to be experiencing discontentedness. But you will still experience occasional situations where people might try to be bitter, harsh, and hostile. But that's choices that they're making, but it doesn't land on you because you've extinguished all your unwholesome karma.
So the only way for like the car and the motorcycle incident to be unwholesome karma is if you haven't trained your mind?
Yeah, if I hadn't trained my mind and I had made decisions based in craving, anger, and ignorance, I would have then experienced unwholesome karma. So let's just say I would have hit my brakes real fast in order to have him, like, boom, he runs into me, right? Or say I gave him the middle finger. Now he's even angrier and he starts to move into me, right? Like, so there was no craving, anger, ignorance in my decision to change lanes. So I didn't experience anything unwholesome. Sure, he honked his horn, but that didn't bother me. That didn't affect me. That's just an impermanent situation. So you're going to experience people being bitter and harsh and hostile to you occasionally when you're enlightened. It's going to be very few and far between, but it's going to happen. So your enlightenment and your extinguishing of unwholesome karma isn't based on what other people are choosing to do around you. It's based on what you're experiencing within your own mind and what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So it's important to be able to see the difference in this, because sometimes people think that, oh, if somebody came up to you and was disrespectful to you, that's your unwholesome karma. Yes, in some situations, if you're having like constantly people disrespectful to you, this is because you're putting out disrespect. But even when you're enlightened and you're being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, and you're doing that 100% of the time for 5-10 years, you're going to have an occasional situation where someone's going to be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. But in that situation, your mind's going to be completely protected, that you're not going to experience any discontentedness. So you can get to a point where you're improved your karma so well because of your practice that 99.9999999% of the time, people are going to be loving and kind and warm and respectful to you. But you're going to have the occasional situation where people aren't. And when that's occurring, your mind's going to be completely peaceful and joyful, even though other people are choosing to function in unwise ways.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me see if we have any other questions. I don't see any. So let's go to the next one, because remember, we don't actually, these are some teachings here. If you guys haven't read this yet, you guys can read that here in the Eightfold Path. There's the core Eightfold Path, but then there's a couple other discourses here in the book where the Buddha is talking about multiple things. Because here with right action in the Eightfold Path, I've taught you the twofold purification of the mind, but the Buddha's words here are helping you to see what the twofold purification of right action is. And then I've taught you the trades not to be applied and all these other things. So you guys can learn this if you'd like. Okay, so let me get down to this one, number 38. And Vibhav, is that for reading? Would you like to read that one?
David, I think on the right action twofold, I'm not sure. I've not heard you teach it, so it'd be good for you if we can do. I think we talked about the livelihood, but not the action.
Okay, yeah, I have taught it, but I haven't used the words of the Buddha to teach it to you. So what I teach you guys in all the foundational teachings is I teach you, of course, what's said in the Eightfold Path, which is the Buddha teaching you right here to abstain from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. That's the first fold of purification of right action. Okay? The next fold of purification of your right action is making sure that you're not doing any bodily actions that is causing harm to other beings. And that's the way I describe it in all the foundational teachings. I teach you the first fold and the second fold all in the foundational classes. But these are the words of the Buddha explaining that to you in terms of the fetters, making sure that you don't have any craving, anger, and ignorance involved in your bodily actions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can read the next chapter.
Okay, sure. So here is chapter 38. There you go.
With the destruction of craving comes the destruction of unwholesome karma. Monks, develop the path and the way that leads to the destruction of craving. And what is the path and the way that leads to the destruction of craving? It is the 7 factors of enlightenment. What 7? The enlightenment factor of mindfulness, the enlightenment factor of investigation, the enlightenment factor of energy, the enlightenment factor of joy, the enlightenment factor of tranquility, the enlightenment factor of concentration, the enlightenment factor of equanimity. When this was said, the Venerable Udai asked the perfectly enlightened one, Venerable Sir, how are the 7 factors of enlightenment developed and cultivated so that they lead to the destruction of craving? Here, Udai, a monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings and elimination, maturing and release, which is immense, super, measureless, without ill will. When he develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings and elimination, maturing and release, which is immense, super, measureless, without ill will, craving is abandoned. With the abandoning of craving, unwholesome karma is abandoned. With the abandoning of unwholesome karma, discontentedness is abandoned. All of the 7 factors of enlightenment are explained in the same way to include the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, and concentration, with the final factor being described in the same way as in the below. He develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings and elimination, maturing and release, which is immense, super, measureless, without ill will. When he develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings and elimination, maturing and release, which is immense, super, measureless, without ill will, craving is abandoned. With the abandoning of craving, unwholesome karma is abandoned. With the abandoning of unwholesome karma, discontentedness is abandoned. Thus, Udai, with the destruction of craving comes the destruction of unwholesome karma. With the destruction of unwholesome karma comes the destruction of discontentedness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. This is a really good discourse for you guys. For those of you guys that understand the Eightfold Path and maybe you're practicing it to a certain level of detail, at some point as you're practicing that very closely, you're going to need to understand the 7 factors of enlightenment. And this is one discourse that the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that, because as you're practicing the Eightfold Path, that's the way to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. That's the path that's leading to that. And as you're chucking away more and more and more of those particular teachings, because what he's teaching you is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. But what you're doing when you're first developing your path is you're eliminating wrong view. You're eliminating wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. And as you're doing that and your mind's starting to release, your mind starts to swing, where your mind was chasing after these cravings, desires, attachments, and you have these pleasant feelings, and your mind's experiencing all those conditioned feelings. Well, when you start letting go of your cravings, your mind kind of swings to the other side. You can feel dull and lethargic. You can feel like kind of numb and kind of icky for extended periods of time, for multiple weeks, because your mind has overshot the middle and it's moved to the other side. And now maybe you start to realize that you're not in the middle there, and the mind might start to actually crave again, and you kind of overshoot the middle again, and you go over here to craving, but not as much as you had before, but you're still craving craving. So your mind kind of swings like this back and forth like a pendulum. And what you need to do is continue to practice the Eightfold Path very closely, but you need to bring in the 7 factors of enlightenment. That's what's going to help you to eliminate those residual cravings, to kind of hone the mind in and really fine tune it. So that's why the Buddha talks about it as leading to the destruction of craving. But you wouldn't be able to eliminate craving through just the 7 factors of enlightenment. And this is why it's important to understand the Buddhist teachings in totality, that it's not just the 7 factors of enlightenment that does this, it's the Eightfold Path. And then as you're working on that and you're starting to let go of a lot of your significant cravings and you're seeing your mind start to swing like this, you bring in the 7 factors of enlightenment to fine tune the mind. And there's other places where the Buddha teaches the 7 factors of enlightenment to be able to help you to understand that. Then as we get down here, this is actually what we were just talking about. As the mind eliminates its craving, desire, attachments, that with the abandoning of craving, meaning the mind isn't craving anymore, then that means unwholesome Kamma is abandoned, meaning it's eliminated, it's been extinguished, because you're no longer making decisions through craving, desire, attachment. And now when you've eliminated your unwholesome Kamma, there's no discontentedness. Right? So eliminating unwholesome Kamma doesn't mean that everybody's going to walk straight and look you in the eyes and be respectful every single second. It's not like, oh my goodness, here comes an enlightened being, roll out the red carpet, let's be on our best behavior around this enlightened being. You're still going to experience people doing things that are unwise around you. But you've abandoned discontentedness. You're not going to be experiencing any discontentedness when those people are choosing to do those kinds of things. And it's not going to affect you. It's not going to cause any harm to your physical body. Your mind is going to be completely peaceful and joyful, even though people are choosing to do unwise things around you. Right? So here's the Buddha helping you to be able to see that as you destroy your unwholesome Kamma, there's this destruction of discontentedness. Because the unwholesome Kamma that you're eliminating is the craving, the anger, and the ignorance. And when you eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, you're no longer making decisions through that. So now your relationships start to clean up. So all the people that are close to you and all the people that you are spending time with regularly, in those situations, you're not experiencing bitterness and harshness and hostility, but you're going to have this occasional person that you don't spend time with who's going to be bitter and harsh and hostile perhaps, but your mind's going to be fully protected in that situation. So let me know what questions you guys have here, where the Buddha is helping you to see that the 7 factors of enlightenment are going to help you to be able to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And by eliminating craving, desire, attachment, you're going to eliminate unwholesome Kamma because you're no longer making decisions through your own selfish desires. Okay, so it looks like Samantha has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, I've noticed over the past few months as I've really worked on following the path that it kind of brings a thought into what you were saying with the mind swinging like a pendulum. I tend to not react to many things now. And in a way, it feels like apathy. And I don't know if it's because I've kind of overshot the mark or if it's me, not being used to not reacting to things. And so it seems like apathy when really it's more just contentedness.
Yeah, you'll have to look at that and see. And over time, you'll get more and more comfortable with your mindfulness to be able to see. Because if you have overshot the middle and you get to this complacency or dullness and lethargic, you'll be able to see because your mind's not peaceful. You're not joyful there. If it's just that your mind is content and your mind is joyful, it just feels weird because you're so used to reacting instead of responding, and your response could actually be to say nothing at all. Where like maybe in the past, if you were in the mall and some kid was misbehaving, maybe you would like put your nose into it and tell the parents what they should or shouldn't be doing. Where now you just look at it, you're just like, not my place to be able to say anything. And now you can just maintain your contentedness. And it might feel awkward for you because in situations where you would tend to in the past take some kind of action, you're not choosing to do that anymore. And you need to be able to see if that's the case, your mind's going to be peaceful, your mind's going to be joyful, you're not producing any unwholesome Kamma, and you're going to need to be able to discern that for yourself, because each situation is going to be unique and be different. Because essentially the way that I describe enlightenment, one of the things I talk about is it's kind of like getting a new pair of shoes, that when you get this new pair of shoes, they don't oftentimes feel comfortable as soon as you put them on your feet. You usually have to walk around in them a little bit in order for them to feel comfortable. And then eventually that pair of shoes that felt so uncomfortable, and they might have even gave you blisters, by the time you walk around in them for a few days or a few weeks, they're the most comfortable shoes you've ever worn, because you've kind of worn them in. This enlightened mind is that way. When your mind first starts moving towards enlightenment and you're getting into the stages of enlightenment, it can feel a little bit uncomfortable because you're not used to functioning in the world through this enlightened mind. It's a new mind that you kind of have to get used to. So that could be what's going on, or it could be what you're describing is apathy. You'll have to look at that and see in each situation and discern that for yourself. And if you have specific examples that you'd like to share, we could talk about that. But the real indicator is going to be your own mind. If you're noticing unconditioned joy, if you're noticing unconditional happiness and peacefulness, then that's the middle. Your mind is there. You just got to get comfortable with whatever's going on and realizing that, you don't have to go off and take action for every little thing that you're seeing or experiencing.
Okay, well, I would say that I feel very peaceful, but I would not say necessarily joyful. So do you have to have all those components in order to be kind of in the middle way, or?
Yeah, the peace and the joy that I'm talking about. Sometimes when we talk about joy, again, in the unenlightened state, we're used to that excitement, where we're bouncing off the walls, right? And we're just like, oh my goodness,
Right.
I'm so excited. That's not the joy that we're talking about. The joy is like the mind is uplifted. It's easy for you to smile. It's like, oh wow, look at that, right? It's not that you're bouncing off the wall. So that's the unconditional joy that we're talking about, that the mind's bright, it's uplifted, that it's easy for you to smile, the mind's content and peaceful and stable. I mean, you're just enjoying every single thing that you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, it looks like Janae has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
So is the mindfulness in the Eightfold Path and the mindfulness of the 7 Factors of Enlightenment the same kind of mindfulness?
Yes, it's the same thing. You'll see teachings of the Buddha that kind of overlap each other in certain situations. So what he talks about is the 4 foundations of mindfulness and awareness of mind in the Eightfold Path. That's what he's talking about here. Because the way that the 7 Factors of Enlightenment are taught is that when the mind is sluggish, dull, and lethargic, you like to practice the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy, and joy. That's what's going to uplift it. And when the mind is in that excited state where you are bouncing off the wall, conditional excitement, overactivity of the mind, you practice tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Well, the thing that's going to allow you to figure out whether or not the mind's sluggish or whether it's overactive or excited is your mindfulness. So while investigation, energy, and joy are practiced when you need to uplift the mind, in the tranquility, concentration, equanimity is practiced when you're trying to bring the mind out of that overactive state. Mindfulness is practiced all the time, all day long. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll actually be practicing all 7 of these all the time, where you'll have mindfulness 100% of the time. You'll be investigating the teachings periodically, even as you get to enlightenment. You'll still be interested in the teachings because there's so many discourses and so many little facets to them that you'll still be investigating to a certain point. You'll have this energy where the mind is uplifted, where you don't get tired or exhausted. You can sustain your energy all day long. You're going to have that unconditioned joy, but your mind's also going to be tranquil, like peaceful and calm. You're going to have concentration where there's focus. You're going to have that equanimity where there's calmness and composure, even in difficult situations. So as you're making your way to enlightenment, you need that mindfulness from the Eightfold Path in what he's talking about here in the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, to look over the mind so that you'll know what state is your mind in, so that you can bring in the certain antidote or the certain solution or the certain prescription. This is where the Buddha gets the reputation of being like a doctor, but you are your own best doctor. The Buddha's giving you the tools for you to be the doctor. And the mindfulness is your assessment of the mind and kind of looking over the mind and trying to determine what state is the mind in and what tool do I need to use in order to bring it to the middle. And the more that the mind is in the middle, it'll just stay there all the time. But any time that you see the mind not in the middle, you need to be able to know what tools to invoke in order to bring it into the middle. So for example, if you're out at the mall and you get so angry and frustrated at this person that's walking in front of you and they're walking so slow, loving kindness. That's what's going to antidote this anger. Let me arise some loving kindness for this person, right? And now the mind comes into the middle. So each one of these symptoms that you see in your mind with your mindfulness, there's going to be an antidote. And the more that you see that and you know that, you can now fine tune the mind in any given situation. But it's your mindfulness that's going to allow you to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions here. So now let's go to chapter 39. Is there someone who would like to read this one? It's a little bit of a long one. Maybe nobody will volunteer. Oh, Vibhav, perfect. All right, looks like it's about 2.5 pages, Vibhav.
Anyone can produce Nibbana, enlightenment. And what Ananda are the 6 classes? Here, someone of the black class produces a black state. Someone of the black class produces a white state. Someone of the black class produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. Then someone of the white class produces a black state. Someone of the white class produces a white state. And someone of the white class produces a Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces a black state? Here, someone who has been reborn in a low family, a family of chandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or waste collectors, one that is poor with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of the black class produces a black state. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces a white state? Here, someone who has been born in a low family, a family of chandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, waste collectors, one that is poor with little food or drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence of the break of the body after death, he is reborn in a good destination, in a heavenly world. It isn't in such a way that someone of the black class produces a white state. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the black class produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white? Here, someone has been reborn in a low family, a family of chandalas, hunters, bamboo workers, cart makers, or waste collectors, one that is poor with little food and drink, that subsists with difficulty, where food and clothing are obtained with difficulty, and he is ugly, unsightly, ill-proportioned, with much illness, blind, crippled, lame, or paralyzed. He does not obtain food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his hair and beard, he puts on ochre robes, and goes forth from the household life into homelessness. When he has thus gone forth, he abandons the 5 hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then, with his mind well established in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the 7 factors of enlightenment and produces Nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of the black class produces Nibbana, which is neither black nor white. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces a black state? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Khattiya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities. Abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in misconduct by body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces a black state. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces a white state? Here, someone has been born in a high family, an affluent Khatriya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. He engages in wholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. In consequence, with the breakup of the body, after death, he is born in a good destination, in a heavenly world. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces a white state. And how is it, Ananda, that someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white? Here, someone has been reborn in a high family, an affluent Khatriya family, an affluent Brahmin family, or an affluent householder family, one that is rich with great wealth and property, abundant gold and silver, abundant treasures and commodities, abundant wealth and grain, and he is handsome, attractive, graceful, possessing supreme beauty of complexion. He obtains food, drink, clothing, and vehicles, garlands, scents, and ointments, bedding, housing, and lighting. Having shaved off his head, hair, and beard, he puts on ochre robes and goes forth from the household life into homelessness. When he has just gone forth, he abandons the 5 hindrances, defilements of the mind, things that weaken wisdom, and then, with his mind well established in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he correctly develops the 7 factors of enlightenment and produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. It is in such a way that someone of the white class produces nibbana, enlightenment, which is neither black nor white. These, Ananda, are the 6 classes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So essentially what we've got here is we've got the Buddha saying it doesn't matter where you're born, you can get to enlightenment. Because remember, during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was a strong caste system in place. Whereas if you were born into a low family, people thought you were destined to a life of servitude and difficulties and struggles throughout the rest of your life. Or if you were born into an affluent family, then, oh, you must be noble, you must be like this great individual. Well, the Buddha was teaching that it's based on your decisions of what you choose in this life that's going to determine what your life is going to be or what it's not going to be. And he's talking about how it doesn't matter where you're born, you can still get to enlightenment. So he talked a lot of details here, which I think are very self-explanatory. So I'm just going to see if you guys have any questions on anything here.
David, I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I think this, if I'm not mistaken, this is one course which kind of says that anybody can produce nibbana, right? I mean, that's the title of the discourse.
Mm-hmm.
But it does say that in the, like, to get to entire enlightenment, like, they've gone from householder into homelessness and put on the yoga robes and then, try to get to enlightenment. So it seems to be indicating that you have to, like, kind of be a monk in this case, or this is just like the way it's written out.
This is what he's talking about in this particular discourse, but remember, you need to understand the teachings in the totality, that there's other discourses where he says very clearly, he says anybody can get to enlightenment. He doesn't classify it as someone who's ordained, but here he's talking about ordination and getting to enlightenment in that method, but you can get to enlightenment through household life as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Is that Burl?
Yes, Beryl.
Beryl.
Hi, David. I understand from this chapter your explanation is that the Buddha wants to say no matter where you're born, rich or poor, you can get to enlightenment. But when I read this, I feel that it's easier for the one who born in rich affluent family to get to enlightenment, because for the poor one they lack of clothing, worry about drink and food. So I feel a bit of not so fair or optimistic about the condition. This is my understanding. I don't know how to read this chapter. I don't know if I get it through.
Sure. So I would encourage students to not think about fairness, because the natural law of Kamma is always fair, so to speak. You are experiencing whatever you produced, but it's important to not think of it as fair or not fair, right? Because the Buddha is not deciding for himself what's fair and not fair. He's just explaining to you the way the natural law functions. That it is true that if you come into the world and you don't have to worry about your food and clothing and shelter and medical care, it gives you more opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment. It's not whether it's fair or not. You're experiencing that rebirth based on decisions that you made in your previous life. So, in my opinion, for somebody who is being reborn into a situation where they don't have to worry about their food, clothing, shelter, medical care, yeah, it's going to be easier for them if that's what they choose, if they choose to go in that direction. No matter where you're born, whether you're born in a family that lacks resources or has resources, there's still obstacles to overcome in order to be able to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of which obstacles and how you overcome them. So you're going to face with obstacles, even as an individual who's born into a wealthy family, because one of those obstacles are that maybe somebody's so wealthy and so rich that the people around them maybe function in a way that doesn't allow you to see the unwise decisions that you're making. Like, I've been involved with very rich families at different times in my career, and I see that maybe the father and the mother are so rich and so wealthy, and they have a whole staff of people working in their house, and they just cater to these people's every need. Or like, say, for example, say you were a partner in a law firm, right? And now say that all your staff are like just at your beck and call and just doing things your way just because they've learned how you are, and you're very rich, very powerful, very influential, and they don't want to get on your bad side, so they just kind of fulfill all your cravings. So you don't get a chance to see what your cravings, desires, attachments are. So there's obstacles, even with someone being rich and wealthy and influential, but it's just different obstacles. But at the very basic minimum, in order to survive and actually get an opportunity to get to enlightenment, there needs to be food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And for someone who's rich and affluent and has all those kind of resources, they don't have that obstacle to overcome. And that's one of the challenging obstacles for someone who's born into an impoverished family, is just knowing where your next meal is coming from. So if that obstacle is removed from that standpoint, yeah, it's more straightforward for a person who is born into a more affluent family. But that's not to say that they don't have obstacles, because they surely do. Okay, so I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go to the last chapter for today. This is chapter 40. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, I saw a hand go up. Looks like Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
The arising of discontentedness. I have said, Ananda, that discontentedness is dependently arisen. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. If one were to speak thus, one would be stating what has been said by me and would not misrepresent me with what is contrary to the truth. One would explain in accordance with the teachings, and no reasonable consequence of one's assertions would give ground for criticism. Therein, Ananda, in the case of those ascetics and Brahmins, advocates of Kamma, who maintain that discontentedness is created by oneself, that is conditioned by contact. Also in the case of those ascetics and Brahmins, advocates of Kamma, who maintain that discontentedness is created by another, that too is conditioned by contact. Also in the case of those ascetics and Brahmins, advocates of Kamma, who maintain that discontentedness is created both by oneself and by one another, that too is conditioned by contact. Also in the case of those ascetics and Brahmins, advocates of Kamma, who maintain that discontentedness has arisen randomly, being created neither by oneself nor by another, that too is conditioned by contact.
Okay, thank you, Samantha. So as you guys have learned in the Four Noble Truths and in all these other teachings, that it's craving, desire, attachment that is leading to discontentedness. But that craving could never be triggered if there wasn't contact. So that's why the Buddha is saying that discontentedness is dependent on contact, that you need to have contact through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. That's what's going to lead to any kind of discontentedness that you experience. Because as you experience the contact, because of the cravings, the mind's going to see this contact as either agreeable or disagreeable. And now if it's agreeable to you, you'll experience pleasant feelings. And then if you experience disagreeable contact, you'll experience the painful feelings. So contact is a prerequisite for any discontentedness. And we're going to be studying in volume 9, the 6 sense bases in detail. We're going to be going through that so you can see this very, very clearly. So this is helping you to be able to see that cause and effect, or that action and result. That's the natural law of Kamma. That's what the Buddha is helping you to awaken to, among other natural laws, that you need to be able to see this cause and effect. And where something like this actually helps you to be able to understand that discontentedness is arising due to contact. And you also learned previously in this book that any Kamma is created by contact too. There needs to be contact, that you can understand that anytime the mind is discontent, it's wise to break contact, right? If you're having a conversation with your life partner or a friend or family member and you're noticing frustration arising, break contact, walk away, right? Because otherwise there's going to be still more and more discontentedness arising. And now with that contact, if you're being bitter, harsh, and hostile, now you're going to produce unwholesome Kamma. So one of the best things you can do when you're noticing discontentedness arising is break contact, walk away. And that's where something like this becomes very powerful for you. Because one of the things that we usually do in the unenlightened state when we lack wisdom of why we're experiencing discontentedness is as you become more and more angry, you might be more and more frustrated and kind of yelling and hollering at the people around you, trying to force them or control them to do things a certain way. But if you understand these natural laws, you'll make different decisions. That it's very unwise to be bitter, harsh, and hostile, of course, but also your discontentedness that is arising, go put yourself in a room somewhere, right? Calm down. If you need 10 minutes, if you need an hour or 2 or 3, or you need to just be alone for an entire day by yourself, go do that. Because you can calm the mind down. You're not making any unwholesome Kamma in that situation. And that could be potentially one of the best things that you could do in that situation. So that's why a teaching like this is so important, to understand that discontentedness is going to be dependent on experiencing contact, so that whenever you're experiencing any discontentedness, you can just eliminate contact. And that's going to help you to distance yourself from the unwholesomeness of the mind, and now you can eliminate your cravings so that in the future you can have contact, but it just doesn't trigger any cravings because the craving's been extinguished. But if you sit there and you allow the mind to stay wired this way, that you keep taking in this contact and you keep getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and your mind just keeps staying wired with anger, you're never going to eliminate the craving. So if you break contact and you walk away, that's training your mind to let go, let go, let go. Now, over time, you eliminate your craving, and now in the situation, you can choose to be in that situation without having any discontentedness arising. But for a period of time, you're going to need to learn to walk away from these situations. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom if you like. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for being interested in learning and growing and developing on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in this same volume, volume 6, but we're going to be finishing it up. We're going to be going from chapters 41 to 45. Normally we do 10 chapters in a week, but we're only going to do 5 next week. So you can read these chapters before class or after class, and then come to class and actually be able to learn in the class like this. And I teach this class at 9 a.m. in the morning at the temple, or 9 p.m. here at home in the home studio. And you guys can join either way, online or in person. In person at the temple, and then online here when I'm teaching at home. But even when I'm teaching at the temple, I live stream it so you can join there as well. So you need to check your local listings and time zones to know what time those classes are. Tomorrow in our group learning program, we're going to be in Volume 1, Chapter 11. This is where I'm going to teach you all about meditation. This chapter is titled Developing Your Practice. This is all about meditation, where I'm going to teach you all the ins and outs of the different meditation techniques and styles that the Buddha taught. And then on Monday, I'm going to be starting a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course. I teach that same course every month, the first full week of the month, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. So you guys are welcome to join that either at the temple here in Chiang Mai, or you can join online because I live stream that as well. So again, thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your interest in learning and practicing these teachings. As you would like help, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help you guys. Be well and have a lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.